They say life is made up of moments, tiny fragments of time that define who we are. I never believed that. Until that night. It was supposed to be just another ordinary Friday evening, but fate had other plans for me. I had been married to Matt for 5 years, and somewhere along the way, we lost the spark that once kept us alive. Our conversations were mundane, our touch routine, and our lives had fallen into the kind of comfort that numbs the soul. That night, I needed to feel alive again. I slipped into a red dress that clung to my curves, reminding me of the woman I used to be before the weight of responsibilities dulled my shine. My reflection stared back at me, eyes filled with a mixture of excitement and guilt. Matt was buried in work, as usual, and I didn't bother telling him I was going out. I needed this for me. The bar was dimly lit, filled with laughter, music, and the intoxicating scent of freedom. I ordered a glass of wine, savoring the way it warmed me from the inside out. As I glanced around, I felt a sense of liberation. Here, I wasn't Matt's wife. I was just a woman, and for the first time in years, I was ready to embrace that. Then I saw them, 2 men sitting at a table, their eyes locked on me. One had dark hair and a smile that could melt glaciers. The other was rugged, with a beard that made him look both dangerous and alluring. My pulse quickened as they approached, their confidence palpable. "Mind if we join you?" the dark-haired one asked, his voice smooth as silk. "Not at all," I replied, my voice betraying the excitement I felt. They introduced themselves as Nick and Alex, and before I knew it, we were lost in conversation. Their words were like honey, dripping with charm and intrigue. Nick's knee brushed against mine, sending electric currents through my body. Alex's eyes never left mine, as if he could see right through the layers I had built around myself. Hours passed, or maybe it was minutes. I couldn't tell. Time seemed irrelevant in the haze of desire that enveloped us. Nick leaned in, his lips dangerously close to my ear. "You're different," he whispered, his breath warm against my skin. A shiver ran down my spine, and I knew I was teetering on the edge of something I couldn't control. The pull between us was undeniable, and I was powerless to resist. It wasn't just lust, it was the craving to feel alive, to break free from the chains that had bound me for so long. We left the bar together, our bodies humming with anticipation. The hotel room was dimly lit, shadows dancing on the walls as if they too were part of our forbidden tryst. Nick's hands were on me, exploring, claiming, while Alex watched with eyes full of hunger. Their touch ignited a fire within me, one that had been dormant for far too long. In that room, I forgot who I was. I was no longer Matt's wife, the woman who lived a life of routine and predictability. I was a creature of desire, lost in the heat of the moment, consumed by the passion of 2 strangers who made me feel like the only woman in the world. When it was over, I lay there, breathless and trembling, the weight of what I had done slowly sinking in. The euphoria faded, leaving behind a sense of dread that wrapped around my heart. What had I done? How could I face Matt now, knowing that I had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed? As I walked home in the early hours of the morning, the guilt began to gnaw at me. I wanted to believe it was just a one-time thing, a fleeting moment of weakness. But deep down, I knew the truth. I had opened a door that couldn't be closed, and the consequences of my actions would haunt me forever. And now, here I am, confessing my darkest secret to you. The guilt is a constant companion, a reminder of the night I let desire consume me. I don't know how to go back to the life I had before, or if that's even possible. Should I have stayed home that night? Would it have made a difference? I'm left with more questions than answers, and the weight of my choices hangs heavy on my soul. The bar was dimly lit, the air heavy with the scent of alcohol and the faint haze of cigarette smoke. It was the kind of place where anonymity reigned, where people came to forget the outside world, even if just for a few hours. I hadn't planned to end up there that night, but something inside me snapped, a need for escape, for something different. I sat at the bar, nursing a drink, my eyes scanning the room without really seeing. The music pulsed around me, a steady beat that mirrored the restlessness in my chest. That's when I noticed them. Nick and Alex. They were seated at a table not far from the bar, their laughter cutting through the noise. Something about their energy drew me in, an intoxicating blend of danger and excitement. Nick caught my gaze first, his eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that sent a shiver down my spine. He nudged Alex, and soon, both of them were looking at me, their smiles widening. It was an invitation, one I knew I should resist, but I couldn't bring myself to turn away. Before I knew it, I was standing at their table, introductions exchanged over another round of drinks. They were charming, magnetic in a way that made me forget everything else. Nick, with his rugged, carefree demeanor, and Alex, whose quiet confidence was equally captivating. Together, they were a force that swept me up, leaving me breathless and craving more. We talked, we laughed, the hours slipping away until the bar announced last call. But none of us were ready for the night to end. We spilled out into the cool night air, the buzz of the alcohol and the thrill of their company making me feel alive in a way I hadn't in years. Nick leaned in close, his breath warm against my ear. "Our place isn't far from here. Come with us." It was a question but also a promise. I should have said no, should have walked away, but the part of me that had been so desperately searching for something, anything, nodded in agreement. Their apartment was a short walk away, a sleek modern space that felt as enticing as its owners. We barely made it through the door before Nick was pulling me close, his lips capturing mine in a kiss that was all heat and urgency. Alex stood behind me, his hands on my waist, grounding me as Nick's kisses became more demanding. The world outside ceased to exist as we moved to the bedroom, the three of us tangled together in a haze of desire. It was wild, uninhibited, a night that burned itself into my memory with every touch, every whispered promise. Nick's hands were rough against my skin, a stark contrast to Alex's softer, more deliberate caresses. They moved in sync, each knowing instinctively what I needed, driving me to the edge and back again. It was a whirlwind, a storm of passion that left us all breathless and spent. As the first rays of dawn broke through the blinds, I lay between them, my body aching in the most delicious ways. For a moment, I let myself bask in the aftermath, the quiet satisfaction that followed the storm. But as the haze lifted, reality crept back in, and with it, the weight of what I had done. I slipped out of the bed, gathering my clothes and dressing in the dim light. Nick stirred, reaching for me, but I gently pulled away. "I need to go," I whispered. Alex's eyes fluttered open, concern etched on his face. "Will we see you again?" I didn't have an answer. I only knew that I had crossed a line I couldn't uncross. "Goodbye," I murmured, slipping out of the apartment and into the crisp morning air. The walk home was a blur, my mind racing with the implications of the night. I told myself it was a one-time thing, a lapse in judgment. But deep down, I knew it was the beginning of something far more complicated, a secret that would come to define my life. One night can change everything. Have you ever made a choice that altered the course of your life? Share your experiences, like, and subscribe to continue this gripping journey. The guilt gnawed at me, a constant, unrelenting presence that refused to be silenced. Every glance Matt cast my way, every touch, every word, was a painful reminder of the secret I carried. I was living a double life, one foot in the world I had built with him and the other trapped in the memory of that night, the night that changed everything. I often found myself lost in thought, the past replaying in my mind like a movie I couldn't pause. The memory of Nick and Alex, their hands, their mouths, the way they made me feel, was as vivid as if it had happened yesterday. It wasn't just the physical connection. It was the way they saw me, the way they made me feel alive and desired in a way I hadn't felt in so long. Matt and I hadn't been intimate in months. Life had gotten in the way. Work, stress, the monotonous routine of everyday life. We drifted apart, and I felt more like a roommate than a wife. That night at the bar, Nick and Alex had filled a void I hadn't even fully realized was there. I closed my eyes, the images rushing back. Nick's lips on my neck, the way Alex's hands explored my body with a tenderness that made my heart race. The feeling of being wanted, of being the center of their attention, had been intoxicating. It was a high I hadn't known I craved, and it had pulled me in, consumed me. But now, the aftermath was a crushing weight. I couldn't escape it, no matter how hard I tried. The secret of my infidelity was a poison, slowly eating away at my happiness, my marriage, my very sense of self. Matt noticed the change in me, though he didn't know the cause. "You've been distant lately," he said one evening as we sat on the couch, the television flickering in the background. "I'm fine," I lied, forcing a smile. "Just tired." But he wasn't convinced. He reached out, placing a hand on mine. "Talk to me," he urged, his eyes searching mine. "Whatever it is, we can get through it together." His kindness, his love, made the guilt even worse. I wanted to tell him the truth, to confess everything and beg for his forgiveness. But I was too afraid of what that truth would do to us, to the life we had built together. So I kept the secret buried, even as it threatened to tear me apart. Late at night, when Matt was asleep beside me, I would lie awake, haunted by the memories. I could still feel their touch, still hear their whispers in the dark. And as much as I hated myself for it, part of me longed for that feeling again, that escape from the monotony of my life. But the guilt always brought me back, grounding me in the reality of my betrayal. I had made a choice, and now I had to live with the consequences, no matter how much it hurt. The guilt was my penance, a constant reminder of the night I had surrendered to temptation and the price I was now paying. The days following my confession felt like an eternity. Matt's silence was louder than any argument, his absence more palpable than any presence. We moved around each other like shadows, barely speaking, both too wrapped up in our own pain to reach out. I felt like I was drowning, the guilt and regret pulling me under with every passing day. One night, unable to bear the distance any longer, I stood outside the door to the spare bedroom where Matt had been sleeping. My hand hovered over the doorknob, my heart pounding in my chest. I knocked softly, my voice barely above a whisper. "Matt, can we talk?" There was a long pause, and then the door opened. He stood there, his face etched with exhaustion, his eyes red from countless sleepless nights. Without a word, he stepped aside, letting me in. I walked in slowly, my eyes scanning the room, taking in the rumpled bed and the clothes strewn about. It was a stark contrast to the neatness Matt usually maintained, a visual representation of the chaos that had erupted in our lives. "I don't know where to start," I admitted, sitting on the edge of the bed, my hands trembling. I hate what I've done to us." Matt sat down across from me, his gaze fixed on the floor. "I don't know if I can forgive you," he said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. "But I also don't know if I can walk away." His words were a lifeline, fragile and tenuous, but a lifeline nonetheless. I reached out, my hand hovering over his before finally resting on it. He didn't pull away, but he didn't reciprocate either. It was a start, however small. "We can't undo the past," I said, my voice trembling. "But I'm willing to do whatever it takes to fix this, to fix us." Matt's eyes finally met mine, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of the man I had fallen in love with. "I need time," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "And I need to know if the baby is mine." I nodded, tears welling up in my eyes. "I've already contacted Nick and Alex. They're willing to do a paternity test." "Good," Matt said, his tone firm but not unkind. "We need answers." The silence that followed was heavy, filled with unspoken fears and uncertain futures. Finally, Matt stood up and moved to sit beside me, his hand hesitating before resting on my shoulder. "I miss us," he admitted, his voice breaking. "I miss you." His words shattered the dam inside me, and I turned to him, wrapping my arms around his neck, holding him as tightly as I dared. "I miss you too," I whispered, my tears soaking into his shirt. For the first time in weeks, we clung to each other, finding solace in the familiar touch. His lips brushed against mine, tentative at first, then more insistent, as if trying to remember what it felt like to be whole together. We moved to the bed, our kisses deepening, hands exploring as if rediscovering each other for the first time. It was desperate, passionate, and filled with the need to reconnect in the only way we knew how. For a moment, the pain, the betrayal, all of it faded away, leaving just us, tangled in each other, searching for a way back to what we once had. As we lay there afterward, our breaths mingling in the quiet room, the weight of our reality returned, but this time, it felt a little less suffocating. We weren't healed, not by a long shot, but we had taken a step, however small, toward finding our way back to each other. The days following the paternity results were fraught with tension and silence. Matt's presence in the house felt like a ghost of the man I once knew. He was there but distant, lost in his thoughts, trying to process the new reality we both faced. The paternity test confirmed what I had feared. Nick was the biological father. Matt and I avoided the conversation for days, each of us too afraid to break the fragile peace we had managed to maintain. The nursery, which had once been a place of hope and excitement, now felt like a room filled with unanswered questions and broken dreams. One evening, as I stood by the crib, folding tiny clothes with trembling hands, Matt's voice broke the silence. "Do you love him?" he asked from the doorway, his tone devoid of emotion. I turned slowly to face him, my heart in my throat. "No," I said firmly. "I made a terrible mistake. But my love has always been for you. He nodded, stepping into the room and taking a seat on the small chair by the window. I've been thinking a lot about us, he said, his voice softer now. About how we got here and where we go from here. I moved to sit on the floor by his feet, my eyes searching his face for any sign of hope. Matt, I'll do whatever it takes to fix this, to make things right between us. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, his hands clasped tightly. It's not going to be easy, he said. Trust has been broken, and it'll take time to rebuild. I know, I whispered, tears threatening to spill over. But I believe in us. I believe we can find a way through this. For the first time in what felt like forever, Matt reached out, his hand brushing a stray tear from my cheek. I still love you, he admitted, his voice thick with emotion. Despite everything, I still love you. His words were a balm to my wounded heart, a small but significant step toward healing. I leaned into his touch, savoring the warmth and comfort it brought. We'll take it one day at a time, he said, his eyes meeting mine with a mixture of determination and vulnerability. And we'll do it together. In the days that followed, we started therapy, facing the pain and betrayal head-on. It was a long, arduous process, filled with tears, anger, and moments of doubt. But each session brought us closer, forcing us to confront the cracks in our relationship and begin the slow work of mending them. Nick and Alex were informed about the results, and we agreed on a plan for Nick to be involved in the baby's life. It wasn't easy, but we knew it was necessary for the child's sake. As the months passed, the wounds began to heal, and the anticipation of our baby's arrival brought a renewed sense of purpose. We weren't the same as we were before, but we were stronger in a different way. We had faced our demons, and though the scars remained, they were a testament to our resilience and commitment to each other. Forgiveness was not an endpoint but a journey we were committed to walking together, step by step, with love as our guide. Forgiveness is a journey, not a destination. Have you ever had to rebuild trust after a betrayal? Share your stories, like, and subscribe to continue exploring tales of love, loss, and redemption. What challenges do you think this couple will face next?